My name is Claire. I am a librarian. I spend my days surrounded by books, the scent of old pages and the quiet hum of turning paper. Books are simple. They don't lie. They don't hide secrets. They don't change overnight, but people do. That's what I learned. And that's why I'm here, telling this story. It started on an ordinary afternoon. The library was calm, filled with the soft rustling of pages and the occasional whisper of visitors. I was shelving books when I first saw him. A man standing in the aisle, running his fingers along the spines of books like he was searching for something, but not in a hurry to find it. He had an easy presence, relaxed, like someone who belonged there. I didn't think much of it at first. People came and went all the time, but then he returned, again and again. At first it was just small talk. What are you reading today? How do you like this author? His voice was smooth, carrying a warmth that made conversation effortless. It was innocent, natural, but over time our conversations grew longer. We talked about books, about history, about the little things that make life interesting. He had a way with words, thoughtful, deliberate. Like he meant every word he said. I should have asked more questions, but I didn't, because I liked the way he made me feel. He was different, not just polite, but considerate. He listened, he remembered details. One day, he handed me a book. "You should read this," he said. "It has a strong, kind protagonist. She reminds me of you." And that's when it started. A feeling I didn't want to name. A feeling I should have run from. But even in the quiet of the library where everything felt peaceful, there was always a shadow. A whisper in the back of my mind. I had seen this before. Not in my life, but in my mother's. I grew up watching her heartbreak piece by piece. My father had left, not suddenly, not all at once, but slowly in small betrayals that built over time. There was another woman, and I hated her. Not just for what she did, but for what she allowed to happen. For the way my mother had cried at night, thinking I couldn't hear. For the way I had to grow up knowing love could disappear without warning. And yet, here I was, standing at the edge of something that felt right, but also dangerous. I told myself it was fine. He was kind. He was single, wasn't he? I never asked about his personal life, and he never offered. "What do you do when you're not reading?" I asked once, teasing. He smiled. "I work in finance. It's nothing exciting. I prefer talking to you." His answers were always vague, never too much detail, never too little, just enough to keep me from asking more. I ignored it, because it was easier that way. Because I wanted to believe that this, whatever it was safe. I told myself that I deserved this, that I wasn't doing anything wrong, that I was careful, that I would never let myself become the kind of woman I once hated. But feelings don't ask for permission, and secrets don't stay hidden forever. One evening, as the library emptied out, I caught him staring at me. "What?" I asked, laughing a little. "Nothing," he said, but there was something in his eyes, like he wanted to say more. Like he was holding something back. "I have something to tell you." I waited, but then his phone rang. A name flashed on the screen, too fast for me to read. He looked at it for a second too long. Then he silenced it. "It's not important," he said, and in that moment I felt it. Something was wrong. It was subtle, like a shift in the air, a pause that lasted too long. But I pushed it away, because I didn't want to believe it. Because the truth once spoken cannot be taken back. And I wasn't ready for the truth. Not yet. The next morning, he brought me coffee. "I thought you might need this," he said, smiling. I thanked him, trying to ignore the feeling in my chest. It wasn't guilt, not yet. It was something else. Doubt, a quiet, creeping doubt that settled in the back of my mind. I told myself I was overthinking it, that not everything had to have a hidden meaning. But deep down, I knew better. That afternoon, I reached for my phone and hesitated. I wanted to search his name, to see if there was something, anything, I had missed. But I didn't. I put my phone away, convincing myself that if something were wrong, I would know. That if there was something I needed to see, he would tell me. People aren't like books. You can't flip to the last page and find the answers. You have to wait, you have to trust. So I did, and that was my first mistake. Adam started coming to the library more often. At first, I told myself it was just a coincidence. Some people enjoy reading. Some people find comfort in quiet spaces. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't just the books. It wasn't just the library. It was me. I tried not to think too much about it. But every time I looked up, he was there. browsing the shelves, sitting by the window, turning pages slowly like he wasn't really reading. Just waiting. For what? For me to notice? For me to say something? One morning, he walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. He set one down beside me. "I thought you might like this." I hesitated. "Why?" He smiled. "Because it's cold outside, and because I remembered how you like your coffee." It was small, simple, but something about it made my heart tighten. We started talking more. Not just about books, but about life, about work, about the little things that make people who they are. He asked me about my favorite childhood memory. I told him about the summer I spent by the lake with my mother, before everything changed, before my father left, before love became something I no longer trusted. I asked him about his. He paused for a second too long before answering. "Summer road trips with my family," he said. "Driving with the windows down, music blasting, the kind of moments you don't realize you'll miss until they're gone." There was something in the way he said it, like he understood loss, like he had lost something too. I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. Some things are better left unsaid. One evening, we left the library at the same time. It was late. The air was crisp, the streetlights flickering. "Let me walk you home," he offered. I should have said no. I should have kept my distance. But I didn't. We walked slowly, talking about nothing and everything. The kind of conversation that feels effortless, like a melody you've heard before but never really paid attention to. At one point, he looked at me and said, "You know, I think we were meant to meet." My breath caught. Meant to meet? I looked away, pretending to focus on the road ahead. Fate, destiny, those were dangerous words, words I didn't let myself believe in anymore. But standing there, under the dim glow of the streetlights, I almost wanted to. Days passed, then weeks. I kept telling myself I was being careful, that I was just enjoying his company, that I wasn't getting attached. But every morning I caught myself looking for him. Every evening, I found myself replaying our conversations. I told myself it was harmless, that it was different this time, that he was different. But wasn't that what my mother used to say? "He's different, Claire. He loves us." But love doesn't leave. Love doesn't disappear without a word. Love doesn't make you question your worth. I had spent years building walls, making sure I would never be in my mother's position. And yet, with every smile, every glance, Adam was finding his way in. And I was letting him. One night, he handed me another book. "You always pick the best ones," I teased. He smirked. "This one reminds me of you." I turned it over in my hands. A story about love and loss, about 2 people who met at the wrong time. I swallowed. "Have you read it?" He nodded. "It's powerful, but painful. The kind of story that stays with you." Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. I should have listened to that feeling. I should have walked away. But instead, I smiled and said, "I'll let you know what I think." And just like that, I stepped a little further into something I couldn't name. Something I wasn't ready for. Something that would break me in ways I never saw coming. I never asked about Adam's life outside the library. I told myself it didn't matter. He was here, with me, sharing quiet moments between the pages of old books and coffee cups that grew cold too quickly. That was enough. Or at least I wanted it to be. But there were gaps in his stories. Small, almost unnoticeable at first. A missing detail here, a vague answer there. One evening, as we sat in the library's reading corner, I asked, "What do you do when you're not reading?" He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Finance," he said. "It's not that exciting." I waited for him to continue. He didn't, just turned back to his book, as if that was all there was to say. Something about his answer felt rehearsed, safe, like he had said it before. I should have asked more. I should have pushed, but I didn't. Because if I asked, I might hear something I didn't want to know. And once you hear the truth, you can't unhear it. So I let it go. Days passed, then weeks. We fell into a rhythm. Mornings with coffee, afternoons lost in conversations, evenings where his voice lingered in my head long after he had gone. But the more time we spent together, the more I noticed the little things. The way his phone was always on silent. The way he never mentioned family or friends or anything that tethered him to a life outside of this. The way he would disappear for days without a word, only to return as if nothing had happened. One night as he walked me home, I asked, "Do you ever feel like running away?" He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "Why do you ask?" I shrugged. "Just wondering." He was quiet for a long time before he said, "Sometimes." That was all. Just one word. No explanation. I should have asked him what he was running from. But I didn't, because deep down, I was afraid his answer might change everything. The first real crack appeared one rainy evening. We were in the library, the sound of raindrops tapping against the windows. The power flickered, and for a brief moment, we sat in darkness, only the glow of our phones lighting the space between us. That's when I saw it. His screen lit up. A name flashed across it, too fast for me to read, but I caught enough. Not a work contact, not a friend, someone else. He turned his phone over, face down, and looked at me like nothing had happened. Something inside me shifted. "Who was that?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "No one important," he said too quickly. A lie. I should have walked away then. I should have trusted that voice in my head, the one that had been whispering warnings all along. But I didn't. Because I wanted to believe in him. In us. Because I thought, maybe, just maybe, I was wrong. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about my mother. I thought about the nights she had waited for my father to come home, the way she had smiled through her pain, convincing herself that love was enough. I had promised myself I would never be her. I had promised myself I would never wait for someone who kept secrets. And yet, there I was, waiting, hoping, ignoring the unspoken truths that were right in front of me. The next morning, he was already at the library before I arrived. He greeted me like always, like nothing had changed. And for a moment, I let myself believe it. I let myself pretend that everything was normal, that the doubt curling inside me was just my fear, my history bleeding into something that wasn't the same. But wasn't it? I watched him that day. The way he laughed, the way he spoke, the way he carefully avoided saying too much. I noticed the way his fingers tapped against the table when he thought I wasn't looking, restless, nervous. I noticed how he checked his phone when he thought I wasn't paying attention. His expression unwritable. He was hiding something. I knew it. I felt it. And yet I stayed. I told myself I needed more proof. That I couldn't walk away based on a feeling. That I wasn't my mother, jumping to conclusions, making accusations without reason. But wasn't this a reason? Wasn't my own instinct enough? That evening, as we left the library together, I felt the weight of what I wasn't saying pressing against my chest. I turned to him, forcing a smile. "Tell me something real about you," I said. "Something I don't know." He exhaled, looking away for a moment before meeting my eyes again. "I hate the sound of clocks ticking," he said. "I can't sleep if I hear it. It reminds me that time is always moving, whether we want it to or not." His answer caught me off guard. It was honest and vulnerable, but it wasn't what I was asking. He was giving me pieces of himself, but never the whole picture. Never the parts that mattered. Never the parts that explained why he felt so close, yet so distant at the same time. I nodded, pretending it was enough. Pretending I didn't see the way he exhaled in relief when I didn't push for more. Pretending I didn't feel the cracks widening beneath my feet. Because once the truth comes out, you can't take it back. And I wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. It happened on a quiet evening, the kind where everything felt still, as if the world had paused. I was at home, curled up with a book, letting the words blur together as my mind wandered. I had been thinking about Adam, about the way he looked at me, about the things he didn't say, about the questions I never asked. The doubt had been creeping in, but I kept pushing it away. Then my phone rang. I glanced at the screen, an unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something made me hesitate. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was something else. I let out a small sigh and answered, "Hello?" Silence, then a voice. A woman's voice. "Is this Claire?" I sat up a little straighter. "Yes, who's this?" A pause. Then softly, almost too softly, she said, "My name is Rachel. I need to talk to you. It's about Adam." The room suddenly felt colder. My fingers tightened around the phone. "What about him?" She took a deep breath, like she was bracing herself. "I'm his wife." The words hit me like a wave, knocking the breath from my lungs. I forced out a laugh, a dry, humorless sound. "That's not possible." "It is," she said. "We've been married for 6 years. 6 years. Longer than I had known him. Longer than I had even imagined." The number echoed in my mind, twisting into something sharp and painful. I wanted to tell her she was lying, that Adam wasn't married, that this was some cruel joke. But deep down, I knew she wasn't. I could hear it in her voice, the pain, the exhaustion, the quiet pleading. And suddenly, every unspoken truth, every vague answer, every moment of hesitation made sense. The way he never talked about his personal life, the way he was always just a little too careful, the way his phone was always on silent. "I don't believe you," I whispered, but the words felt weak, empty. Rachel inhaled sharply, as if she had prepared for this reaction. "I have pictures," she said. "I can send them to you." I squeezed my eyes shut. "Don't." But my phone vibrated anyway. A message, a series of images. I didn't want to look, but I did. Adam and Rachel, smiling, their wedding day, their vacations, their life, a life I had no place in. My stomach twisted, my hands trembled, my mind raced through every memory, trying to make sense of something that could never make sense. "I thought you should know," she said quietly. I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I saw you," she admitted. "I saw you with him. And I needed you to know the truth." The truth. It was right in front of me now, undeniable and crushing. I felt sick. All this time I had been so careful, so afraid of becoming the kind of woman I despised, the kind of woman who wrecked homes, the kind of woman my father left my mother for. And yet, here I was. A terrible thought crept into my mind. Had Adam done this before? Had there been others? Was I just another name in a list of mistakes? "I didn't know," I whispered. Rachel sighed. "I believe you." Her voice cracked slightly, and that hurt more than anything. She wasn't calling to accuse me. She wasn't calling to fight. She was calling because she loved him, because she wanted to keep her family together. And I was the problem. I didn't want to be the problem. "Please don't hurt my family," she said, barely above a whisper. "I need your help." Tears burned at the edges of my eyes. I had two choices. I could pretend I never got this call. I could believe whatever excuses Adam would give me and hold on to the version of him that I had fallen for. Or I could do the right thing. "I understand," I said, my voice barely steady. The line went silent for a moment, then she exhaled. "Thank you." I hung up before I could say anything else, before I could change my mind, before I could let my heart make excuses for a man who had only ever given me half-truths. The room felt unbearably quiet now. The kind of quiet that presses against your chest, making it hard to breathe. I looked down at the pictures again. The proof of what I had been ignoring. I had thought Adam was different, that he was honest, that he was mine, but he wasn't. He never was. And now, I had to let him go. The next morning felt different. The air was heavier, the world quieter. I woke up with a dull ache in my chest, as if my body already knew what my heart refused to accept. The phone call from Rachel played over and over in my mind. Her voice, her pain, the quiet desperation beneath her words. I had spent the night staring at the pictures she sent me. Proof, undeniable. But part of me still clung to denial, to the illusion I had unknowingly built around Adam. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe there was something I didn't understand. But deep down I already knew. I had to confront him. When I arrived at the library, Adam was already there. As if nothing had happened, as if the world hadn't shifted beneath my feet the night before. He smiled when he saw me, the same easy smile that had once made my heart flutter. Now, it only made my stomach turn. "Morning," he said, his voice light, familiar, too familiar. I swallowed, my throat dry. "Can we talk?" His smile faltered just slightly, but he nodded. "Of course." We stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The library doors closed behind us, sealing us away from the comfort of books and quiet spaces. Out here, there was no escape. No distractions, just the truth waiting to be spoken. I took a breath, steadying myself. "I got a call last night." Adam's expression didn't change, but I saw it, the flicker of something in his eyes, a shadow of recognition. He already knew. "From who?" he asked, too careful, too controlled. I didn't let him play this game. "Rachel." Silence. He looked away, running a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. "Claire? Are you married?" My voice was steady, but my hands weren't. I clenched them into fists to keep them shaking. "Yes or no?" Another pause, a second too long. Then, "Yes." The world tilted. Even though I had known, even though I had seen the proof, hearing him admit it made everything real. I let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. "How long were you planning to keep this from me?" "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said. "I didn't plan this. But you let it happen." He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. That somehow was worse. I felt something inside me crack. The weight of every stolen moment, every unanswered question, every small hesitation now made sense. I had trusted him, I had believed in him, and he had let me. "Did you ever think about telling me?" I asked. "Or was I just supposed to figure it out on my own?" He sighed, rubbing his face with his hands. "I was scared," he admitted. "I didn't want to lose you." "You never had me," I whispered. Adam looked at me then, really looked at me, as if he was finally seeing the damage he had caused. "Claire, I don't." My voice was sharp, cutting through whatever excuse he was about to give. "You don't get to stand here and act like this is complicated. You lied. You let me believe something that was never real." "It was real," he said quickly. "What we had, it was real." I shook my head. "No, it wasn't. Because real things don't come with secrets. Real things don't come with someone else waiting at home, wondering where you are." He flinched, and for a second I saw regret in his eyes, but regret wasn't enough. Regret didn't undo the lies. "Do you love her?" I asked. He hesitated. That was my answer. I felt my heart clench, but I forced myself to hold his gaze. "She loves you," I said. "She wants to keep your family together." Adam's jaw tightened. "It's not that simple." "It is," I countered. "You made vows to her, you chose her, and I refuse to be part of this." His hands clenched at his sides, his breathing uneven. "Claire, please, I need time." Time, that was always the excuse, wasn't it? Time to figure things out. Time to make decisions. Time to keep me hanging on, waiting, hoping, and believing in something that was never mine to begin with. I took a step back, shaking my head. "I'm not waiting for you, Adam." His face fell, panic flickering in his eyes. "Please?" But I had nothing left to give. I turned and walked away. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was carrying the weight of every lie, every stolen moment, every version of him I had wanted to believe in. I didn't look back, because for the first time since I met Adam, I finally saw the truth, and I was ready to face it. I walked away, but something inside me refused to let go. My feet kept moving, but my heart lingered in the space we had just shared, caught between the truth and the lies I had let myself believe. The air felt heavy, pressing against my chest, making it hard to breathe. My mind kept replaying his words, his excuses, the desperate way he had looked at me, as if hoping I would stay, but I couldn't. Not after everything. Not after knowing what I knew now. I wanted to hate him. I wanted the pain in my chest to turn into anger, into something sharp and unforgiving. But it didn't. Instead, it settled like a weight inside me, slow and unbearable. Because no matter how much he had hurt me, a part of me still cared. A part of me still wished things had been different. I hated that. I hated how my heart refused to let go as easily as my mind had. I had spent years protecting myself from this exact situation. I had built walls, set rules, and promised myself that I would never love someone who wasn't mine to love. But Adam had slipped through the cracks, through the spaces I hadn't even realized were open. And now I was left trying to put myself back together, trying to silence the part of me that still wanted to believe him. I knew what I had to do. There was no other choice. I had to walk away, completely, without looking back. I had to choose myself. But it wasn't easy. The memories clung to me, pulling me back into moments I had once thought were real. His voice, his laughter, the way he had made me feel like I mattered. It had all been an illusion, but it was an illusion I had wanted to believe in. And that was the hardest part, realizing that I had let this happen. I had ignored the signs, the warnings, the little voice in my head that had told me something wasn't right. I spent the next few days lost in my thoughts. I avoided the library, knowing he would be there, knowing I wasn't ready to face him again. I tried to focus on other things, on work, on anything that would take my mind off him. But nothing worked. The pain sat in my chest, a quiet, constant reminder of everything I had lost. Or maybe of everything I had never really had in the first place. Then one evening my phone buzzed. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding before I even saw his name. I knew it was him. I didn't want to answer, but I did. "Claire," his voice was quiet, hesitant. "Can we talk?" I closed my eyes. I had told myself I wouldn't do this, that I wouldn't give him another chance to explain. But against my better judgment, I found myself whispering, "Why?" "Because I miss you," he said. "Because I don't know how to do this without you." A sharp pain twisted inside me. I had waited for those words, wished for them in the quiet moments when I was alone, But now that I was hearing them, they felt empty. "You have a wife, Adam," I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "You don't get to miss me." There was silence on the other end, then a heavy sigh. "I know," he admitted, "but it's not that simple." "It is," I said. "It always has been." I waited for him to say something else, to fight for me, to give me a reason to stay. But he didn't, and that was all I needed to know. "Goodbye, Adam," I whispered before hanging up. I stared at the phone for a long time, waiting for it to ring again. But it never did, and as much as it hurt, I knew it was for the best. I had made my choice, and this time, I was choosing myself. The first few days felt unreal, like I was moving through a world that no longer fit me. I kept expecting my phone to ring, for Adam to call, for him to say something, anything, that would make this all make sense. But the silence stretched on, long and unforgiving. I told myself it was for the best, that I had done the right thing. But knowing something and feeling it were two different things. The ache in my chest didn't disappear just because I had chosen to walk away. The memories didn't fade just because I wanted them to. I buried myself in distractions. I worked longer hours, filling my schedule with anything that kept my mind busy. I spent more time with friends, pretending their laughter was enough to drown out the thoughts that crept in when the world went still. I stayed out later than usual, just to avoid the quiet of my own apartment. But no matter how much I tried, the thoughts always found me. They came in the moments between conversations, in the seconds before sleep, in the spaces where he used to be. I hated how much of me still belonged to him. One afternoon, as I was shelving books at the library, Sophie walked up beside me. She had been watching me closely for days, waiting for me to say something, to admit how much this was hurting. I knew she could see it. The way I avoided certain aisles, the way my fingers hesitated over books Adam once recommended, the way my smile didn't quite reach my eyes. "You don't have to pretend, she said softly. I let out a small laugh, hollow and tired. "I'm fine." She didn't believe me. I didn't believe me either. "You deserve someone who's completely yours," she said. "Not someone who makes you doubt, not someone who keeps you waiting." I nodded because I knew she was right, but my heart still wasn't ready to let go. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the book Adam had given me weeks ago. The one he said reminded him of me. I traced the cover with my fingers, remembering how I had smiled when he handed it to me, how I had believed every word he said. How foolish that felt now. I wanted to throw it away. I wanted to erase every reminder of him, to wipe away the parts of my life where he had existed. But instead, I opened it. Not because I wanted to relive the past, but because I needed to face it. The words blurred together at first, my mind too distracted to focus. But then slowly, I started reading. And for the first time in days, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger, it wasn't regretful. It was something softer, quieter. Acceptance. I had loved him. I wouldn't pretend otherwise. What we had, whatever it was, had been real, at least for me. And maybe in some way, it had been real for him too. But love wasn't enough. Not when it was built on lies. Not when it had been stolen from someone else. I closed the book and set it aside, exhaling slowly. It was time. Time to stop waiting for an explanation that wouldn't change anything. Time to stop holding on to a version of him that had never truly existed. Time to let go of the weight of what could have been. The next morning, I walked into the library with a lighter heart. The pain was still there, but it didn't consume me anymore. It was just another part of the story, a chapter that had ended. But letting go wasn't just about walking away. It was about choosing not to look back. It was about reminding myself, again and again, why I had left in the first place. And some days, that was harder than others. There were still moments when I caught myself thinking about him. Still times when I wondered what he was doing, if he thought about me, if he regretted anything. The questions would creep in late at night, slipping through the cracks of my resolve, making me doubt myself. But then I would remember Rachel's voice, her quiet pain, the way she had asked me to help her keep her family together. And I knew I had done the right thing. A week passed, then another. Slowly, I started to feel like myself again. The memories were still there, but they no longer controlled me. The pain was still present, but it was softer now, like a dull ache instead of a sharp wound. One evening, I found myself at a cafe, sitting across from Sophie. She watched me carefully, as if trying to gauge whether I was truly okay or just pretending to be. "How are you?" she asked. I thought about the question, thought about it, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to lie. "I'm getting there," I said. She smiled. "Good. You deserve better, you know." I nodded. I did know. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to believe it. That night as I walked home, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The air was cool, the city lights stretching out before me, full of possibilities. I wasn't fully healed yet. I knew that, but I was healing. And that was enough. As I reached my apartment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. For a brief second, my heart clenched. A small part of me wondered if it was him, if he had finally reached out, if he had something left to say. I took a deep breath and pulled my phone out, glancing at the screen. It wasn't him, and I felt nothing but relief. I woke up to a quiet morning, the kind where the world felt still, like it was waiting for something to happen. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn. It had been weeks since I had last seen Adam, and the ache that once felt unbearable had started to dull. I no longer woke up with the weight of his absence pressing against my chest. Instead, I woke up feeling lighter. Not completely free, not yet, but lighter. Moving on wasn't a sudden realization. It wasn't a single moment where everything just clicked into place. It was slow, almost unnoticeable at times. One day, I found myself walking past the cafe we used to go to without hesitating. Another day, I listened to a song we had once shared, and it didn't sting the way it used to. And then there were days when I caught myself laughing, really laughing, without feeling like I was pretending. Healing wasn't a straight line. Some moments still brought back memories I wished I could erase. Some nights still carried the weight of words unspoken. But I was learning to let go, learning to move forward, learning to choose myself in ways I never had before. That morning, I walked to the library as I always did, but something felt different. Maybe it was the way the sun hit the pavement just right, or the way my heart didn't clench when I stepped inside. Maybe it was just me. Maybe I was finally starting to change. Sophie was at the front desk flipping through a magazine, but when she looked up and saw me, she paused. "You look different," she said, tilting her head slightly. I smiled. "I feel different." And I meant it. She studied me for a second before nodding. "I'm glad. You deserve to feel good again." Her words settled in my chest, warm and reassuring. For the longest time, I had carried so much guilt. Guilt for not seeing the truth sooner. Guilt for letting myself fall for someone who was never mine to begin with. Guilt for breaking my own rules, for becoming the kind of person I had sworn I never would. But slowly, I was starting to forgive myself. I had made mistakes, yes, but I had also learned from them. And that had to count for something. That afternoon, as I rearranged the books on the shelves, my fingers brushed against a familiar cover. The book Adam had given me. The one he had said reminded him of me. My hands froze over it, memories flooding back before I could stop them. I remembered how he had smiled when he handed it to me, how his eyes had lingered on mine like he had meant every word he had ever said. But words were easy. Promises were easy. The truth was much harder. I picked up the book and turned it over in my hands, letting my fingers run over the worn edges. I had held on to it for too long, as if keeping it meant keeping a piece of him. But I didn't want a piece of him. I didn't want reminders of something that was never real. I walked over to the donation bin near the entrance, and without hesitating, I dropped it in. It landed with a soft thud, barely making a sound. But inside me, it felt like something had shifted. Something had been released. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to look back. That evening, I took the long way home. The streets were alive with people, the sounds of laughter and conversations drifting through the air. It felt normal. And I realized how much I had missed feeling normal. For so long, my world had revolved around him, around what we were, what we could have been, and what I thought we had. But life was still here, moving forward, waiting for me to catch up. I passed by a small bookstore and, on impulse, I walked inside. The scent of paper and ink filled the air, comforting in a way I hadn't expected. I wandered through the aisles, running my fingers along the spines of books I had never read before. And then I found one. A book I had never seen, never heard of, but something about it caught my eye. I picked it up and read the first page. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about heartbreak. It wasn't about loss. It was about new beginnings. I bought it without hesitation. As I stepped back onto the street, the book tucked under my arm, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not hope for someone to come back. Not hope for a love that had already run its course. Hope for me. I didn't know where this new path would lead, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. The air felt lighter than it had in weeks. As I sat by my window, watching the city move beneath me, I realized something. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology that wouldn't change anything, for a conversation that wouldn't make it hurt less, for a person who had already made his choice. I had spent so much time tangled in what-ifs, caught between my heart and my conscience, but now there was only one truth that mattered. I had chosen myself. Healing wasn't a moment of clarity. It wasn't a sudden revelation that everything was okay. It was waking up every morning and choosing not to hold on to the past. It was learning that I could still feel pain without letting it define me. It was realizing that missing someone didn't mean I wanted them back. It had taken time, but I was finally beginning to understand that love should never come at the cost of my own worth. I thought about Rachel sometimes, about the weight in her voice the night she called me. I wondered if she had forgiven him, if they were still trying to piece together something that had already shattered. But that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. Her pain wasn't mine to fix, just like Adam wasn't mine to love. I had done what I could, and I had walked away. That was enough. The memories weren't as sharp as they used to be. They didn't cut as deep. When I thought about him now, it wasn't with anger or longing. It was with quiet acceptance. He had been a lesson, a chapter, a part of my life that had shaped me but didn't define me. He had taught me that love without honesty is just an illusion, that wanting someone isn't the same as having them, that no matter how much we care, some people are never meant to stay. I had spent so much time wondering if I had done the right thing. But the answer was clear now. I had. Choosing myself would always be the right choice. Walking away from something that hurt me, no matter how much I wanted it, would always be the right choice. I wasn't the same person I had been when this all started. I was stronger now. I was learning how to let go without losing myself. I thought about the bookstore that night, about the book I had picked up on impulse. It had sat on my nightstand for days, waiting for me to open it. And finally I did. I didn't know why I had chosen it, but as I read the first few pages, I realized it didn't matter. It was a new story, a new beginning, and that was all I needed. As I turned the page, I let out a breath I didn't even realize I had been holding. I was ready to move forward, ready to embrace the unknown, ready to live a life that wasn't haunted by the past. I wasn't waiting anymore. And that, I realized, was the most beautiful thing of all. Life has a way of teaching us lessons we never asked for. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes walking away is the bravest thing we can do. But in the end, every experience shapes us, every heartbreak teaches us, and every goodbye leads to a new beginning. Maybe you've been in a situation like this before. Maybe you've had to choose between what you wanted and what was right. If you have, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to walk away from something you thought was real? How did you find the strength to let go? Thank you for being here, for listening, for allowing this story to unfold with you. Remember, your journey is yours, and every step forward is a victory. I hope you find the courage to choose yourself, always. Until next time, take care, stay strong, and keep believing in the future that's waiting for you.